and welcome. We are in a brand new trimester and a brand new chapter. This chapter involves inequalities. We are starting with 5.1, solving inequalities by addition
Ashley Ruka, please call
and
extension
subtraction.
6404.
Previous objective was to solve equations by using addition and subtraction. Today's objective is to solve linear inequalities by using addition and subtraction. You will find this chapter very similar to chapters 1 and 2. Then we solved equations. Now we're solving inequalities, but we're going to use the same concepts and tools to solve the same similar problems. Just a reminder, the top of your paper should have the topic 5.1, solving inequalities, and today's objective, as well as new vocabulary. The new vocabulary word that you have for today is set builder notation. And set builder notation is nothing more than a more concise way of writing a solution set. So instead of just saying x is less than 20, it would read with the parentheses x representing x is less than 20. Now, two other things that I want to cover and review with you. It's just kind of expected that you remember, is that the less than symbol and the greater than symbol, when we graph them on a number line, these are represented by an open circle, meaning that it doesn't include that number, and then our arrows would go in either direction. A less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, if you remember, is represented by a closed circle because it does include that number. And then your arrow would go in either direction from that point. So if I had x is less than 3, one more thing that I want to point out to you, if I had to graph this on a number line, what I always do, less than 3 would be an open circle. And then I know that my arrow needs to point in the same direction as my inequality sign. And then I would connect it to my circle. Same thing with x is greater than or equal to 5. I would start at 5, and I know that's a closed circle because it includes 5, and then I know that my arrow for my graph is going to be in the same direction as my inequality symbol. Some students haven't seen that method before, and I just wanted to share and review with you a easy way to graph the inequalities and make sure that your arrow is pointing in the correct direction. All right, we're going to start out with a key concept, just simply addition property of inequalities. If any number is added to each side of a true inequality, the resulting inequality is also true. So we're going to get started with example number 1, and this is nothing more than solving an equation, and again, substituting the equal sign for the inequality. So I have c minus 12 is greater than 65. So I'm going to treat my inequality as my equal sign, and I'm going to add 12 to both sides. And I get c is greater than 77. So that is my solution to say that c is everything greater than 77. Now, instead of substituting 77 back in to check my solution, I'm just going to pick a random number greater than 77 because any number greater than 77 would make this statement true. So I'm just going to pick an easy number and say 80. Does 80 minus 12 work for this equation? So 80 minus 12 is 68, and 68 is indeed greater than 65. So it's a good way to check each solution by picking a number, not specifically the number, but one greater, because it can't equal 77, it's everything greater than 77. And again, if I had to represent this on a number line, 76, 77, 78, 79, plotting a few points. It's an open circle because it doesn't include 77, and I know that my arrow is going to go in the same direction as my inequality symbol. Now this holds true when the variable is always written first. I always write the variable first. So if the variable is on this side when I solve the equation, you'll see that I always flip it back because I always want to make sure that my inequality symbol matches my arrow when I'm graphing. So let's move on. We have 22 is greater than m minus 8. So this is exactly what I was just talking about. 22 is greater than m minus 8. Now I'm going to treat this as my equal sign, put my line down the middle, and now I'm going to add 8 to both sides. Now I have 30 is greater than m. But just as I mentioned before, I always want my variable written first. And if I want my variable written first, then it needs to be backwards. So 30 is greater than m, so m is less than 30. Always having my variable first, when I graph it on my number line, now I know which direction my arrow goes in. It's an open circle at 30, and my arrow is going to be less than, same direction. Now, m represents any number less than 30. It doesn't include 30, so I'm just going to pick 10. Check my solution. Is 22 greater than 10 minus 8? And in this case, 22 is greater than 2. It is. My answer is checked. So I've showed you a way to check your solution, and I've showed you a way to graph. Now, same rules apply for subtraction properties of inequalities. So we are to the multiple choice question. You are going to solve this the exact same way as you would addition. And what I want you to do, it's a checkpoint, and this is the multiple choice question for your Google form. So solve it, and you'll see that the answers are written in set builder notation, but which one is the correct answer for this inequality shown. Make sure you save your answer and record it on the Google form. We are going to move on to a variable on each side. So I have 12n minus 4 is less than or equal to 13n. Now I want to get my variables to one side and my numbers to the other, just like we did in chapter 2. But you'll notice if I move the 13 over to this side, my scale is going to tip over. So the only option I have is to subtract 12n from both sides. This is a positive 12n, and this is a negative 4. I've seen a lot of confusion with because I have a subtraction symbol that I have to add. But really what you're doing is eliminating the variable. The variable is 12n. It's a positive 12n, so we're going to subtract 12n and bring down the negative 4. So negative 4 is less than or equal to 13 minus 12 is just 1n. Now, just as I mentioned before, I'm going to rewrite it as 1n, or just simply n, is greater than or equal to negative 4. So we've solved for n, and our last step is to graph the solution. So I have negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, plotting a few points. It's going to be a closed circle at negative 4, and my arrow is going to match in the same direction as my inequality. So 1n is greater than or equal to negative 4 would make this inequality true. All right. And you can see the same graph there. I apologize, I had forgotten I had written out the steps for you. So as you can see, since negative 4 less than n is the same as n is greater than or equal to 4, I've shown the solution set greater than negative 4. So now we are at a checkpoint. What I want you to do is pause the video and you try this problem and see if you can come up with and graph correctly this inequality. All right, hopefully you have graphed the problem. I am going to set this up. 3p minus 6 is greater than or equal to 4p. So I'm going to draw my line. I'm going to subtract a 3p from both sides. This problem is set up very similar to the previous problem. I get negative 6 is greater than or equal to 1p, and I'm going to flip it around. 1p is less than or equal to negative 6. Negative 7, negative 6, negative 5. It's going to be a closed circle at negative 6, and my arrow is going to go in that direction. Hopefully you got the same answer as I did. Let's move on. Some phrases for inequalities. Make sure that you get these in your notes, because in algebra, they're not always going to be as basic as less than or greater than. We see words like fewer than, more than, at most, at least, no less than. So take a minute and pause the video and make sure you get these phrases for inequalities written in your notes, because you will have some word problems that you need to make sense of. In this example, Panya wants to buy season passes for 2 theme parks. If one season pass costs $54.99 and Panya has $100 to spend on both passes, the second pass must cost no more than what amount? So, the first thing that we need to do is identify kind of what we have to be working with. She has spent $54.99 on one pass, and we need to figure out what she has to spend or what she can spend on the second pass. Now, the key word here is no more than, and you need to figure out what inequality represents no more than. Well, that would be less than or equal to. She has $100 to spend. So I've set up the inequality that represents this equation, and now I'm going to solve it. I'm going to subtract $54.99 from both sides. And x has to be less than or equal to, let's see, 55, so 4501. So that means I'm just going to reread the equation and make sure it makes sense. So Panya wants to buy season passes for 2 theme parks if one pass is $54.99 and she has $100 to spend. The second pass must be no more than what amount? The answer has to be less than or equal to $45.01. So our last problem of today is a similar problem that we just did, a real-world example that you are going to solve and answer in the Google form. Jeremiah's taking 2 of his friends out for pancakes if he spends $17.55 on their meals and has $26 to spend in total. Jeremiah's pancakes must cost no more than what amount? So record your answer in the Google form and then submit your Google form when you are done with the answer. Now the next thing I have on here, something new, is what I've done is I have taken the notes Cornell style for this entire lesson. So the next 2 pages, as you can see, I've written out word for word what I would expect you to have on your paper. So take a minute and just to point out some key things. Do you have your name and date on the paper? Do you have the lesson title on the top of your paper? Do you have an objective? Do you have vocab? And then do you have examples? Because again, you are learning when you are watching me do examples, but you are learning more when you are doing and practicing them yourself. So I have example 1, I have example 2, I have example 3 written out. I wrote down the inequalities and how they can be represented. And then I have the real world examples down here. I have my open-ended and I have my multiple choice answer that I've practiced on my notes. So I just want to emphasize the importance and try to help you stay organized with taking notes for each one of these videos. So if you haven't, make sure that you have these notes written properly, and from here on out, make sure that you are including those key concepts in and on every part of your notes. Thanks, and I will see you tomorrow.